Hi there, it's Adam from Impact Gamers, and for this retro remake, we're going to take a look at Spy Hunter from Midway and Sunsoft from 1983. In the game, you drive along a track in your spy car, shooting pretty much everything that came along, but also with a truck you could drive into, power up, and work your way along to the mission. So, let's look at how we made it. So I've loaded up the free version of Fusion 2.5 and I'm going to click on File from the top menu and New. I'm going to select the application to change its size because I want it to be a bit larger than default. So I'm going to click on Window in the Properties window, and in the window settings I'm going to change it to a custom 840 by 720. And yes, I'd like to modify the frames. In this game, we're only making one level, so we're just making one frame here. And let's click to enter it. And there we go. It's almost a square, just slightly off. With Spy Hunter, you traveled upwards on the screen, so I want quite a lot of height rather than it being a widescreen. I'm just going to turn off my grid and snap to grid just to have it as normal. So we'll insert a new object, which will be our player. So insert new object. This will be the car. Click on active and OK, and click to put down. Now, the size of the car is going to be around a width of 60 and a height of 95, about that size. And typing that in just means that I can get the object to be that size immediately. And let's name it. So let's click on the About properties and change it from active. Let's call it P1 for player 1. And then we'll change the way it looks. It's normally the last thing we do in games, but for now, let's show you how to do that. We're going to right click and edit it. Now the car was drawn from above in the game, so we're looking from the sky, sort of from a helicopter point of view, looking downwards at the chase that's happening. I'm going to zoom in and then press clear on the white piece of paper. And if you want, you can have a go at drawing your own car. You can use the filled in rectangles and create a sort of a red car and define it off with the windshield and the the rear window, and then sort of round off the front and such like that. But we've already got some artwork. So what we're going to do is we're just going to click on import, and here's the player. And we want to make sure that the hotspot is in the center of the image. So with those settings, and that's the hotspot there placed at the center. Now, this is the direction for when we're going to the right. So we're not actually going to change the car to point to the right because you're always driving forwards. We're just going to have it steer to a bit. So we're going to make sure that all of these directions, all of these 4 directions have an image. So I'm just going to right click and copy on the direction 0 that's been animated. And then for direction 8 up here, let's right click and paste. And then for 16, let's right click and paste. And for direction 24, paste. And these are going to correspond to the buttons we press on the keyboard. So when we're driving and pressing forward to accelerate, the car will look like that. And braking downwards, look like that. But when we go to the left, we're going to rotate the car. So we're going to choose the rotate option there, and we're going to choose the angle. And rotation works anti-clockwise or counterclockwise. So 15 degrees there, we'll tilt it 15 degrees that way. And then this side is going to be 360 minus 15, 345, and apply that. And that's what we've got. If you wanted to go a bit further with it, you could do a looping animation of the indicator bulb flashing or the brake lights lighting up, but I'm happy with that at the moment. That's our car. Now, if we go to movement, change it from static to 8 directions. Now, there is a race car option, but that won't behave in the same way. We're going to be driving on rails, as it's called in the games world. So 8 directions will suit us fine, and 50, 50, 50 are fine. You can change the settings if you want faster or slower, acceleration or deceleration. But if we run our application, we'll give that a quick try. There we are. If I press up, go up, down, and then if I drive to the side, it drives to the side, it steers left and right. Happy with that? Let's close that and let's add one more bit of animation in, which will help us later. So we're going to right click and edit on our image, and we're going to go down to disappearing. This is when it blows up, and we're going to import explosion _ 01. Press OK. Now this time it's an import as animation, and a hotspot in the center. An action point can be left wherever. It will play through. We press play quite slowly. So I'm going to change in the direction options the animation speed to maximum 100. And there we go. That means that if the car gets destroyed at any point, that animation will play. Well, let's save it. File, save as. And let's just save it here as Agent Chase. So this next part is a little bit technical, because what we need to do is generate the road down the screen. So a few things we're going to do. First of all, we're going to do is select the frame and change the background color to be a road color. So I'm just going to choose a gray color there. And then next at the top, we're going to insert a new object. This can be active, and click to put it down. It's going to be the road generator. So let's name it. In the about properties, we'll call it generator. And if we right click and edit it, we don't need to really worry about the stopped animation so much, because we're going to create two separate animations for it. And so if we go to the bottom of the list, we can right click underneath stand up and choose new. So this is going to be when the road goes from small to big. And then we're going to right click and new, and we're going to have big to small. So this is when the road widens out and shrinks in to change size. So if we click on small big and press open, there's an animation that we've got. There we go, road small big _1. Now, if you just don't want to bother about the animation, you don't have to import this as an animation. But what you would do is just you'd import number 5 in rather than number 1, because that's actually the big road. So center and center for hotspot and action point, that's fine. Press OK. So all this is, if I zoom out, is a gap in between two bits of green, which gets bigger as it goes on. And in the direction options, we just want to make it loop back to frame 5. So when we play it, it widens and just stays open. That's small to big. If we click big to small and open that, we'll find the same thing. Road, big to small, _1, animation, that's fine. But the same thing with the direction options, we want it looping back to frame 5, so that when it shrinks down, it stays there. So you could just draw this out yourself. So I've set the size to be 1210 pixels high, and that's so that when the road moves left and right, there's still enough of the green grass to show on the screen. So just to make the generator look a bit better, we will import one frame for the start. So let's open that and import just the final of small to big. There we go. Just so we get a rough idea of the size. And that's what it'll look like for a big road. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to place sort of an area that senses where the road is being made. So we're going to insert a new object, active object, click to put it down, right click and edit it, and let's import. And I called this blanking. Couldn't think of a great name, but it's an area to make sure where the road's being generated. And I'm going to place that on top of the generator there, and we'll name it as well. We'll call it blanking plate. So the way that this is going to work is that if there isn't a piece of road on the blanking plate, it knows that it needs to produce a new piece of road, and that's the way that it's going to work. It's going to and then send the road down. Now it needs to know how fast the car's going, so we're going to insert a new object, a counter, and put that down, and let's label this speed in the properties window, and let's also set some limits in the settings. We want it to be traveling at the start of game, so let's say maybe it's speed 60, and the minimum speed we want to slow down to maybe 20 and maximum of 180. You can tweak these numbers. They'll affect some of the gameplay, so just work with keep on testing it each time you make a change. So there's the speed of 60. Now this is the final bit. The generator stays where it is, but if we right click on the generator and clone it, we get a bar underneath called generator 2, which we will name in the about properties window. We will call this the road. This is actually going to be the road, and in terms of movement, we'll change it from static to bouncing ball. It won't bounce, but we do need it to travel, and we want it to go down all the time. So in initial direction, if you click on any of this section, let's click on reset and just set 24 to be on, so downwards. So now we just need to add to the generator something called a flag, which means that we can track whether the road has gone big or small. It's just the same as a switch. It can be on or off, or true or false. So we're going to click new under flags, double click on flag 0, and we'll call this small. Right, now to go to the events. So in the event editor, we're going to do a new condition that if the blanking plate is overlapping the road, and then we'll right click on is overlapping and choose negate. So now we know that if there is no road on the blanking plate, that's when we want to build the next piece of road. So on the timer, we're going to right click on that and fire event after given delay, and we will change it to 0 seconds so it's immediate, and we'll call it something called build road. Make sure you leave the speech marks or the double quotation marks in either side to make a valid expression because it's a string, and okay. And then we need to do the same. We need to create that actual event. So click on new condition, click on the timer, and now click on event and type in exactly the same thing between the speech marks or double quotation marks. There we go. So what we want to do is we want to create an object. So right click underneath create new object, and it's going to be a road, and it's going to be created at relative to the generator. Okay, so it should start to make sense. Let's just have a look if we run our application. There we go. We've got road. See, it's strobing a bit. So in fact, it can't really keep up with being generated. It's moving faster than the code's working. To resolve that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch the road to be a little fatter than it is when it hits the level. So new condition, if the road's position, test position of the road, if it enters the frame from the top, press OK, then we will right click on the road and say scale, set the Y scale, that's the height, and we'll set it to 4 times as tall. 0 in terms of we just want speed. So if we run our application, there we go. And do you see the first bar come out? That first bar, I suspect, is this one here. So we'll start this one off on top. There we go. And there's our road. Now we want it to move the same speed as our counter. So we're going to go into the event editor, and we're going to add a new condition, and we're going to add always, and then underneath the road, we're going to right click on that and we'll say movement, set the speed, click on the counter and find the current value. So the faster or slower we go. Currently it's a straight line, which we'll do in the next section, so that doesn't matter. But let's just try changing the animation to big and small and see if that works. All right, so we're going to click on new condition. That for the generator, on its alterable values, on its flag, if a flag is off, small, and we're going to right click on this because we only want to do it once for the time it's off, not every single count, just only once, not every time it loops through the code. So right click and insert, click on the cogs, limit conditions, only one action, one event loops, otherwise it'll just keep on happening. We want to change the animation sequence, there we go, to, so small is off, so it needs to become big, small to big. And then we'll do the same the other way. So new condition, the generator, alterable value flag is off this time, on it this time, sorry, small. And then we're going to right click on the words, insert, click on the cogs, limit conditions, only run the action when event loops. And rather than big, small, we're going to right click animation, change animation sequence underneath the generator column to big to small. Now, this means the generator is going to change, so we need the road to match. So all it is on line 2, when we build the road, when we create the road, for that particular piece of road, we'll right click and we'll say animation, change. We want to change the animation sequence to be whatever, so we'll use a calculation. The generator's animation value there. So that's the value of the sequence. So what it's saying is it will change its animation to match with the generator's animation. And because they're the same thing, they'll match. But we need the same frame as well. So animation, change, animation frame. And we want to change that to be the generator's animation current frame. Okay, now if we run our application, we should see the road grow. There we go. Grew outwards there. Okie dokes. Next thing we're going to do is we will get the road to move, but let's save our work. File and save. So now we're going to get the road to wiggle, to move. And by moving the generator, that will do what we need. So in the frame editor, what we're going to do is we're going to select the generator. Now, it might be hard. We've got the road and the generator on top of each other. So we're just going to click on the generator in the assets here in the object list. And we're going to go down to movement and we're going to change it to bouncing ball. But this time it's not going to move downwards. It's going to move. We're going to change the initial direction left and right. So we'll reset it and choose both. Clickteam Fusion will decide randomly which to move it. And let's make its speed to be a little bit slower. Let's put it at 50 just for the moment. And we'll need to make some sort of boundaries to make sure it doesn't go too far. So let's insert another new object, active, click to put it down. I'm just going to change its size as we did before with the car. I'm just going to make its height to be 90 so that it's just definitely going to hit into it when it moves to the side. And let's just call this a road barrier. And edit it, just do it a solid color. It just needs to be able to collide, and so that'll do fine. And I'm going to put one over this side as well. And let's go with the coding then. Event editor. So new condition. That it's going to be to do with how fast the speed's going. So we're going to do a special X chances out of Y. And we're going to say, well, let's find out what the current value of the speed is and do that out of 10,000. And then if it does choose to activate, then we'll say movement start if the chance works out. But we'll do the same if we drag down to new condition and we will say this time movement stop. So there's an equal chance of it starting and stopping to move. Now for the barriers. New condition, that if the generator collides with another object with a barrier, at that point we want to right click, we want to get its movement to stop, but we also right click, we want to change its direction, select a direction, and it'll be a mathematical calculation. We're going to find out what direction the generator was currently going. So click on the generator and animation, current direction value. And then we want to add, because it's out of 32, 16, that'll turn it halfway round. So if it's left, it'll be right. If it's right, it's left. Okay, let's just try that. And then there's one alteration we need to make. Run application. There's road wiggled a bit, as you can see. Is it going to go again? Yep, there we go. Wiggled again. And that's working quite nicely. If you find that there's not enough movement, you can move the red barriers. If you find there's too much movement, then once again, you can move the red barriers. But there we go, we can drive. We haven't got any collision at the moment, so we can just go where we like, but that seems to be working quite well. The only issue is that later on, when we change the speed of our car, we want to change how quickly the generator moves, because we don't want it, the faster we drive, the tighter the corners are, because the road will move so rapidly that we won't be able to take the corner. So let's have a look at changing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a rule to say that the generator moves at the speed relating to how fast we're driving. So we're going to click new condition, and we're going to see if the generator is stopped. Movement is generator stopped. And then we're going to right click and negate it. If it's not stopped, then it's moving. Great. So we'll change its speed to match what we want. So we'll right click underneath the generator, movement, set speed to whatever the current speed is, speed, current value, and multiply that by times 0.25. We found that a quarter works quite well. So if we change our speed, it currently starts off at 60. If I go to the settings and change it to start off much faster at 180 and run our application, you can see that's a bit too fast for the road there resizing. So I'm going to actually change my maximum speed to be 150. So if I run that, still a bit too so what I'm going to do at that point is just on the rule on line 3, I've got set scale to 4. I'm going to change the Y scale to 8. Depending on your computer and your speed, you might need to set a bigger number depending on how big the bands are. So if I run the application again, there we go, got nicer roads going along there and traveling on at much faster speeds. Great. Well, that's working nicely. I'm going to change my initial value back down to 60 there, and I'm going to save. So that was the speed initial value in settings that I changed there, and file and save. So we need to be able to accelerate and to brake. So it's not much coding at all, really. We're going to say new condition that the joystick, repeat while joystick is pressed, and then it's already got the up selected, so press OK. Then we want to add to the speed, so right click, add to counter 5. And it will keep on going up until it reaches, in the limits, a maximum of 180 there. And new condition, the joystick, again, joystick, repeat while joystick's pressed, and this time choose down, so 24 there. If you're moving down, right click, we want to subtract from the counter 5. So moving up, add 5, down, subtract 5. But also would like to set a steady speed so that you can brake and then it will naturally accelerate to a set speed. And let's have that as 80, slightly faster than when we start. So new condition, if the counter, compare it to a value, if it is lower than 80, or whatever speed you want to set as your standard driving speed, then if it's lower, add to counter 1. And then new condition, if the counter compared to a value is greater than 80, then you're going faster than the set speed, and right click. I want to subtract from counter 1. Because that didn't take too long, when I'm driving the car, so just to show you something, when I'm driving the car, if I'm now driving sideways now, because if I leave the keys alone, it doesn't default until I choose a direction, a new direction. So it just kind of slides along. So we're just going to add a new condition, and it's going to be the joystick repeat while joystick's pressed, and it's going to be top, and then we're going to right click and negate it. Now, if we're not moving to the top or down or left or right, then we want to set the car's direction to be up. So to save time, I can right click and insert and do the same thing again and again and again. But because I want something so similar, I'm just going to pull the words onto the number, and see the little plus sign appears? That adds in, it inserts it in. So we can then double click and say, oh, if we're not pushing to the right, if we're not pushing down, if we're not pushing left, that means that we're not pressing a direction at that point. And right click, direction, select direction, upwards. So now if I run the application, I can move to the side, but as soon as I let go, it goes upwards. Now, do you notice it does a little boost? That's because I've still got some movement set. So I'm just going to say movement, set speed to 0. And now run the application. Much better. I can drive along, I can accelerate, I can brake. So it is working nicely. So we need to add a distance counter, because that's going to be used to help us with our score, but also with creating other things. So in our frame editor, we're going to insert a new object, and it's another counter. Click to put it down, and we will change it from about, we will call it distance. And we'll go to the event editor, and we've already got a rule: when a road enters the top, we know that there is a movement of a certain amount. So a measurement of 1 line of road. So under distance, we want to add to counter 1. And then if we in the frame editor, we move it on screen. Let's move both the counters on screen. We should be able to move them to the center so we can see them on the road. We should see, as the road comes down, it counts up, and I can accelerate, I can brake, and see those working. Later on, we'll add them to a heads-up display at the bottom of the screen. But an optional thing you can add in, you can save it now, or we can add some road markings. So we're going to insert a new object, active, click to put it down. We'll change its size in its properties to 10 by 10, the same height as the road, and also its name, we'll call it markings. Now these are the central lines that you have on a road. Now if you right click on it and edit, let's clear it, and let's choose the fill bucket and fill it in white. Just make sure that that hotspot is in the center. So just click on the eye for the hotspot and put it in the center, so the measurements are all right. Also, it needs to move the same way as the road moves. So we go to movement and change the type to bouncing ball, and the initial direction, we'll reset it and set it to down. That should be fine. I think it's just a bit of code now. So we can have on always, we've got always set speed to be the value of the speed counter. So I'm just going to move that road from road. I'm going to drag it across so it copies it to markings. So both of them will do the same. Now just when to generate them. And quite simply, I want to generate them from the middle of the road, and I want to do it, nearly half the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the distance to help with that. So I'm going to say new condition, and I'm going to compare 2 general values in special under the cogs. Compare 2 general values. I'm going to find out the distance we've traveled, the current value of that, and I'm going to mod it by 10. Now, mod just means what's the remainder after a division. So this is pretty much just going to tell me what the last digit is of the number. So modding anything by 10. So 11 mod 10 is going to be 1. 12 mod 10 will be 2. 65 mod 10 is going to be 5 because there's 5 remainder. And so I'm going to say if it's lower than 4, so if it's 0, 1, 2, or 3, then I want to generate some road. So underneath the create new objects, right click, create objects. It's going to be the markings and relative to wherever the generator is. And because the generator generates the roads, that should be fine. So if we run the frame, we've got beautiful markings on the road. Now you might find if you accelerate too quickly, we've got the same issue of that banding happening. So let's just go in and just say new condition. If a marking position, test the position. If it comes in through the top, then on the marking, we will right click scale, set the Y scale. Well, it probably doesn't need to be as high as 8, but let's do it as 8 anyway. And 0 for the speed and quality. Oh, do you know what? That looks really ugly at 8. I'm going to take that right down and edit it to 3. Test it out on yours and try. So right click on the tick and edit. That's much better. Happier with that. Slow down. Can you notice these markings are going over the top of me? Well, to solve that, we will close the test application and under always, line 4, we will right click underneath the player and say order, bring to front. Let's save it. File, save. So now that we've got a road that works and moves, so let's go to the frame editor and we'll add some enemies in. What we're going to do is we'll use our car as a template because it's already got the explosion. So right click and clone object. We will make another version. So just press OK. And we will change its name and we will call it enemy space 1. We need to change a few settings on it as well. So while we're here, let's go to the event properties, click on qualifiers, the blank space, and then edit, and add it to the lightning, the enemies one. Now that's just a category. That doesn't change anything, but it allows us to group all the enemy rules together. And values, we need 3 of them, I think. So the first one, you double click, be health. Second one is pace, of the speed at which it goes, but we can't call it speed. If we do call it speed, it complains that there's already it's not a valid name because there's already a variable called speed. So pace, and then the last one, points, sort of the score that you get from attacking it. Let's add the artwork. Let's right click and edit, and let's import, and I'm going to have the easiest enemy being the blue truck here. So just choose the truck and hotspot in the center, export in the center, and do the same thing again where we copy and paste and paste and paste. And then this one we rotated 3, 4, 5. And this one we rotated 15. So all of the artwork's been updated and we've kept all the disappearing explosion in as well. Okay. Its movement needs to be changed. It doesn't want to be controlled by player 1. As fun as that would be, we need to change it to bouncing ball. And let's change its initial direction to up and its speed to be something quite slow at the moment, 8. So if we run our frame, we should watch it just drive off by, there we go, off it goes. That movement's working okay, but let's set up these values. Now this truck is going to be one of the easiest to blow up, so I'm going to set it to 150 because the bullets I'm going to add in will do 25 damage. And the pace, I think maybe traveling at speed 30 might work well. And the points for it, maybe we could get 20 points for it. these are all things that you could change. But that's setting it up ready to sort of set the movement and the collisions and all that. So let's get it to move around the screen and not hit into the walls too much, and do that in the next section. So file and save. So we'll add in so that the car is a bit more intelligent and moves around in a way that suits the driving. But while we're here, we'll clone this object, and I'm going to make two more different types of enemies. So 3 clones, 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to add in the artwork. I'm going to use the orange sports car, and once again, copy and paste. Rotate 3, 4, 5, apply, 15, apply, and change the settings on the health and the pace. So this is going to be slightly stronger, it's going to drive slightly faster, and it's going to be worth more points. And finally, for this one, if we right click and edit, I'm going to use the van, sorry. And let's copy and paste. Set the angle. Set the angle. Now we're leaving them as enemy 1, 2, and 3 because later on we're going to have it randomly create from a list from a random number. So we'll leave them as enemy 1, 2, or 3. But this health I want to be pretty damaging, and its pace is going to be much slower. It's going to be sort of a van that rams you, and because the health is so much higher, I'm going to put the points down to maybe just 2 points per shot. And there we go. So let's save that and then work on the movement file and save. So most of this will be done in the event editor. So let's go into there. And what we'll do is we'll make a brand new group at the bottom for the enemies, just so everything's separate. So we're going to right click on number 18 and insert a group of events and call it enemies. So the first thing is that we want the enemies to drive at their pace, but not all the time. So we're going to set a random chance like we've done before. So we're going to click on new condition under enemies, and it's going to be a special, and it's going to be chances. Now it's going to depend how many enemies are on screen, because the more enemies on screen, the more likely this is going to happen. So click on the enemies and click on pick or count number of objects, and out of 500 seems to work well for us. So if there's 1 object, it'd be 1 out of 500. If there's 2, so if we right click and then insert group enemies, pick or count, pick an enemy at random. So that they all don't respond, we're just going to choose 1, and that's why we're doing it the amount of enemies chances out of 500. The more enemies there are, the more likely one of them is to do this. And what we're going to do is we're going to set its direction to be forwards, so it's driving forwards, and its pace, we'll set the speed to be its pace. So right click under group enemies, direction, select direction, and I'm going to choose 7, 8, and 9, just those 3 directions at the top. Press OK. Right click, movement, set speed, and click on the group enemies, and we'll find out it from the values, AZ, pace. So make sure that's all underneath the lightning there. Good stuff. So if we run our application, they should zoom off upwards. There we go. That one suddenly zoomed off upwards. That one did. And that one hasn't, but that's fine. So you can make that a lower chance. If you're finding your cars are zigging and zagging too much, you can change that. The next thing we want to do is that if they get to the top of the screen, we want them to drive back down. So let's just say a new condition, that if the group enemies position, compare the Y position to a value, if it's getting lower than, say, 100 pixels, so the top of the screen is 0, and if they're getting up towards the top, then we don't do it all the time, so we'll right click and insert on there on the timer, and we'll just use an every sort of 2 seconds might work well, because we don't want it to do them all the time. And we'll right click under the enemies, and we will say that we want to select direction, we want them to travel back down. So let's choose those directions there, and right click, this time movement, we want to set the speed to be, and maybe a random range, so in between 2 and whatever. So make sure you select the triangle, parenthesis, and maximum. You can use tab if you want to select it as well. Make sure you select all of that. We want to find out the pace, but we also want to make it a bit faster than normal, so we will times it by 2. And then we want to do very similar for if they get to the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to right click on 20 and choose copy, and right click again and choose paste. So we need to just alter this. So Y position, let's double click on the less than 100 and say greater. And the frame we know is 720 tools. So if they've got into the bottom 400, and then right click and edit the set direction. So let's get rid of these and put in those, so 6 to 10 across the top there. So right click and edit. Okay, so let's see if they stay on screen now. There, they're driving up. Oh, he's come back down. Yep. Come back down. Yep. So what they're doing though is they're going through each other. So let's change that. New condition, that if a group enemies collision with another object, group enemies, so make sure you've closed your test application to add this in, then we can get them to bounce. Movement, right click, bounce underneath group enemies, getting a nice long tower of ticks. And the other thing is new condition, if the enemies collision with another object, the road, and the road just is multiple objects all stacked on top of each other, so it looks like one bit, but it's lots of different ones. If it collides with the road, then right click, direction, look in direction of, and we'll say relative to the road. Now that seems odd. If you crash into the road, why would you look to the road? That's because in the middle of the road is the hotspot, and that's what it will look towards. So it doesn't matter if it hits on the left or the right, it will go back to try and drive on the center of the road. Let's run the frame. Let's see if they behave a bit better now. Yep, that's it, but I can drive through, but they seem to be doing fine. I've lost 2 of them, but this other one's chasing me fine. Yep, great. So let's add in some damage after we just fixed the moving to front, and it's under the always, line 4 for me. We've got bring to front for player 1, but for group enemies, we'll right click and we'll order to front, and that will do it for all of the enemies there. So let's file and save. So let's add in the way that you can battle the other cars. So in the frame editor, we're going to insert a new object, and this will be our bullet. So active, okay, click to pop it down, just pop it outside the play area. Let's rename it in the about properties, and let's change the artwork. So right click and edit, and you can just clear it. And if you want, you could just draw in the center, a little blob, but we'll open up and we've got bullet here. Okay, and make sure the hotspot is in the center. Great. Now our player is going to shoot, so let's double click or right click and edit either to position something called a action point. Now this is where objects are launched from. So if you click on the action point, we want it to be wherever it's going to shoot from. So if you've got a particular point that you want your car to shoot from, I'm just going to have it from the center at the front, and I'm just going to, in each object, make sure each direction, animation set, that it's set to the front. Okay. So we'll go into the event editor. Now, two things about Spy Hunter. You have rapid fire and unlimited ammo, and also, but the bullets only travel a limited space. So we need to add that in. So first of all, we'll say new condition, and we will say that when the joystick, repeat while joystick is pressed, fire button 1, and deselect up, so it's just fire button 1. By default, it's the shift button, and we are going to right click on the player and launch an object, and we will launch the bullet. Press OK. Now we want to launch in a selected direction, so I'm going to say upwards. Press OK. Now if we run our application and test that and hold shift, you'll see that we get some interesting things. When we turn, it looks like the bullets are firing in an odd direction because they're not turning with us. And also, there's just so many of them. We could slow it down by adding a timer. So let's do that. Right click and insert the timer every, and we can make it to maybe 1/10 of a second, or maybe sort of 12/100ths of a second, something like that. And just run the application, see if it's okay. If it's not, edit it. That seems better. Now the thing is, I want to limit the directions. I want to change the direction it shoots when I'm in a different direction. So we will right click and insert on the every 12/100ths of a second. We will find out the direction of the car. So click on the car, direction, compare direction. So if I'm going up or down, so 8 or 24, then I want to shoot upwards. And I'm then going to right click on 25 and right click and copy and right click and paste like we did before. And I'm going to double click and get rid of those. And if I'm facing any of these directions, press OK. Then I'm going to right click and edit this, and I'm going to launch at direction 6. If I'm facing that way, press OK, right click on 26, copy, right click, paste, and double click to edit, clear those. If I'm going this way, then right click and edit. I'm going to fire that way. Okay. Nearly there. Now we run our application. The firing works much better. Happy with that. Just the distance needs to be controlled. So we're going to do a new condition to limit the distance the bullet travels. So for the bullet, if its position, its Y position, if it is greater than the car's position Y coordinate, so right Y player 1, minus, let's say, 150 pixels, then it's gone too far, and we will go underneath the bullet, we'll right click and destroy. So it isn't greater than, it's less than, because it's going up the screen, so lower. So if we run our application, there we go. And so to extend the fire, you just change the 150 for a bigger number. But let's make the bullets actually do things, and let's actually add some damage for us and for the other cars. So in the enemies, new condition, so I've got it on 24 here. If an enemy collides with another object, the bullet, then at that point, we want to destroy the bullet, and we want to right click under the enemies, and Alt4 values, we want to subtract from their health 25 points. We also probably want to be able to ram them, so we could say new condition that if the player collision with another object, any enemies, then we'll right click under the enemies and we'll Alt4 values, subtract from their health, and let's take off 10. let's also take off some health of us. So under player 1 here, which represents our score and lives, that joystick, if we right click there, number of lives, let's subtract, and let's not lose as many as they do, but maybe lose 2 lives for hitting into them. And also for when they hit into the road, we've already got it on line 23, we will want to be able to take some health off for when they crash. So if they hit into the grass, let's right click under group enemies on that line for when they hit into the road, and say alt for values, subtract from the health, and that's 5. So 5 for hitting into the grass verge, and then 25 for a bullet, and 10 for hitting into us. So what happens when they lose all their health? So new condition, if the enemy's alt for values compare to one of the alt for values, if it is lower or equal to 0, because we're losing 25 health. If they've only got 10, it'll get minus 15. So if it's lower or equal, then at that point we'll right click and destroy them. Great. That should be fine. And then for us, a new condition that if our health, so if it's held in the joystick, like I said before, player 1 there, when our lives reach 0, then we will right click and destroy ourselves. But we need to add the section for hitting the verge as well. So new condition, player 1, collision with another object. If we hit into the road, not the generator, but the road, then we will, under lives, number of lives, subtract from number of lives, let's lose 1 life. Okay, good stuff. We can't see our lives at the moment, so we'll just go into the frame editor and insert a new object, and it's just called lives, and it will automatically default for that. So we run application. There we go. So we hit in, there we go, lost 2 lives there. Hit into wall, lost all our lives. Look at him go. Right, let's restart the game. Just press F2 there. If I shoot away at this car, there we go, I can blow it up. And this car is much more hardy, and I don't think I'll be able to blow it up. Oh, that's me gone. Right, save your work, file, and save. So there's a few things we need to do to sort out the screen. We need to show our score and lives and everything there. We also need to tidy up our lives and also restrict our movement so we don't move too far up and down off the screen. So let's start with the heads up display, the sort of view of the score and the lives. So we're going to load up the layer toolbar. If that's not visible, you just click on view, toolbars, and turn it on there, or Control and K will do it. We want to click on the white piece of paper for a new layer. And if we click on that, we are now working off layer 2. If we select these, they'll say they're on layer 1. You can see 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And anything we add in here will be on 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3. So if we pull the lives, we want that in layer 2. And the speed, we'll have that as well. We'll pull that into layer 2. And the distance, we'll pull that into layer 2. So now we've got them all in layer 2 to see the 2 prefix before the object count. Let's insert a new object, and it's going to be backdrop. It's just going to look pretty. Click to put it down. Let's right click and edit and open up, and there you go, HUD. Click OK, and let's pop that at the bottom of the screen. You can use your size and position to get it exact if you want. And there it is. So these lives don't look great, and there's not many of them. I'd like to have about 50. So I'm going to stretch that out, and I'm also going to change the artwork for them. So you can just change the size. You could change the width down something like 3 pixels and apply, and just draw a bar in there, maybe even sort of tint it, and then you'll see it puts them together. If you right click and edit, you can use the one from our game, but it just is, a little bar. You could draw it yourself. And we want to change the starting amount of lives. Now that's in your application. So if I click on that and go to runtime options, and at the bottom of the runtime option setting for the application, I can change the initial lives to 50. And this is where you can also change default controls if you want different driving. So there we go. Now we got a nice full bar for our health. Now the speed, I'm going to put it in the little speedometer down there. So I'm going to change it to, from numbers in its settings, properties, I'm going to change it to text and change it from black in its font, text options, change it to an orange. Let's pop that down there. And then this for the distance, we'll do that maybe in white or green. Maybe green might work quite well. Let's change it in settings to text and change it to green. There we go. That'll count up nicely there. We want some score. So let's insert a new object and find score object. Let's pop that down. And we will change that also to be from numbers to text. And in the text options, let's make it white and bigger. Also, Terminal is quite a nice old looking font for retro games, so I might use that. There we go. You can add some titles for your HUD, for your heads up display. So insert a new object, and it's called a string. A string is a sort of a collection of letters or even numbers, but a collection of alphanumerics, as it were. Change the color, make it white. If I double click on it, or change its settings. So this is going to be car damage. I'll put that down there. I could make that terminal if I wanted. And if I clone it, like I did before with other things, I get something with the same settings, which I can reuse. So score. Okay, well, we don't actually have a score, but we've done everything for the heads-up display that we want to. So I'm going to click on Layer Toolbar. I'm going to click on Layer 1, and I'm going to click on this lock. Now I've clicked on the lock, I cannot select or move anything in that layer. Even when I'm in that layer, I can't move or select anything. So let's just go back to Layer 1, because that's what we want to be in, and leave that locked because I'm happy with everything there. Let's go into our event editor, and let's have a new condition. A new condition for the player 1 leaving the screen. So player 1 position, test position of player 1. When we reach the top of the screen, we will stop. And then a new condition for the player position, test position, to reach the bottom of the screen. Again, we will stop. Let's look at the score. Now we have got when a bullet hits an enemy already. It's on line 24 for me, but when you find when the group enemies hits bullet, let's add to the score. Now the score is in player 1. Right click, score, add to score, whatever the group enemies values points. So it's not when you destroy it, it's on one hit you get that many points. So if we run our application now, take out, there we go, get some nice points. If I hit into the wall, I haven't changed the hit into the wall, so let's just add that in as well. So, and you can, we say we subtract 1 from lives, but we didn't say right click, movement, bounce. So collision between car and wall, we bounce. Also, if we crash really hard into the wall, we'll end up overlapping it. So we'll say new condition, if car collision overlapping another object, the road, then at that point, let's right click on for player 1 and set our lives to 0. Set number of lives to 0 at that point. There we go. That should finish off that section nicely. And we can look into spawning the enemies and making the game. There we go. Bad crash there. Ending the game and adding all the extra bits in the next sections. So close that test application, file, and save. So we've got to a point now where most of the game's complete. You might have noticed that when we collide with a bad guy, if you're testing it, we lose some lives, but we don't actually bounce and they don't bounce. So let's just add that in so there's a bit of a collision that actually affects the game. So movement, bounce on this line underneath player 1, just there, and underneath the enemies, right click and movement and bounce. Right, now that little bug's sorted, let's go into spawning the enemies. So at the moment, the enemies are all on the screen, but we want to just get them to come in. So if we go back to our frame editor, we're just going to plonk them outside for the moment. And just remember, we've got them called enemy 1, enemy 2, enemy 3. And let's just move the player down to a sort of start position. So now we know what we've got. Let's go to the event editor. At the very start of the frame, we want to destroy all the enemies. So right click and destroy so that they don't interfere. We want it to be the further we go, the more likely we are to encounter enemies. So let's set a new condition, and it's going to be a special, an XY chance, as we've done before. This time we're going to take the distance that we've gone as the X. So the current value of the distance, the more chance, out of 10,000. That seemed to work well for us, but if it doesn't, try a lower number to make it more likely, or a higher number to make it less likely. So that's fine, but we also want it to be related to speed. So we want to right click and insert when the road position, test position, when the road enters the top of the frame. Now, do you see it's turned red? All of these are green, but this one's red. And it's red because it's in the wrong order. It needs to check this rule before that rule. So we're just going to drag it on top. And now it's gone green. So that, if you come across that, that's the issue. This is a rule that triggers on a certain event. And if it's not in the right place, it won't check the trigger in the right way. So if the road enters the top, there's a random chance. And we also want to make sure there's not any cars already there. Now we've got the blanking plate there, which we can use. So if we right click and insert on those words, if the blanking plate collision is overlapping, like we did before, but this time an enemy rather than a road, and then right click and negate. So a bit of road comes on the top of the screen. There's a chance, depending on how far you've gone, it's more likely. And there's no enemies on top of the blanking plate. Then let's create it. Now, we want it to be random creation, and because they all have the same name but just a different number, we can combine the name and then the number together. So if we want to right click under create new object, we're going to create object by name this time, and you can see it's called enemy space 1. So enemy space. Now to join a number, you have to use the add sign, but you joining it as a string. If you join two strings together, if you plus two strings together, they just become one string together rather than changing the string itself. So enemy space and then plus string value of a random range between 1 and 3. Now that means there's an equal chance that it'll make enemy 1, enemy 2, or enemy 3. You might not want that, so I'll just quickly show you after we say where it creates. So relative to, getting ahead of myself, relative to the generator at the top of the screen. So that's fine. If you want to make it so that one car is more likely, so let's say the blue car, we want it to be much more likely. So we'll clone this object and we'll say there's 5 of these, and let's clone the orange car and there's 3 of these. Now it means that it's 5 times more likely to make a blue car than a grey car, or 3 times more likely to make an orange car than a grey car, as long as we change the code to match. So we just need to change the fact of the number in the event editor. So right click on that tick of create by name, edit, and rather than a random range between 0 and 1, 1 and 3, we'll do it 1 and 5. 1 and 5? No, much more than 1 and 5. 9. Between 1 and 9. And with the generator. So it creates the enemy from 1 to 9. Now, we also want to set its direction so that it goes downwards if it's created at the top by the generator. And so I've just selected the directions that are downwards, and right click. We want to set its speed, movement, speed, set speed to be the group enemies, values, retrieve its pace. Now if we run the application, we'll go along. Doesn't seem to be any enemies. Now this is to do with a sort of slight quirk of Clickteam Fusion, that sometimes it matters the order that you check things. So rather than checking that there's the blanking plate isn't being overlapped by the enemies, if we check that the enemies isn't overlapped, so just drag them, or you can double click, change it so the group enemies is not overlapped by the blanking plate. That way, because there's no enemies, it can actually run the comparison properly. So if you ever run into an issue like that, there we go, and there's a couple of cars, oops, coming straight for me. Let's see if I can take them out. Taking a bit of damage here. Oh, and I'm gone. So let's add a power up to allow me to recharge myself, because I didn't fare very well. Also, if you found it a bit too difficult, maybe change it to be 20,000 and then it's half as likely. But let's save our work, file and save. One of my favorite parts of Spy Hunter and sort of like the on-road actions is when the car drives into the lorry in order to be sort of sprayed or upgraded. So we're going to use that to fix our car. We're going to have a sort of a mobile garage come for us. So if we go into the frame editor and let's create a new object, and we'll create it from the enemies, because it won't be an enemy, but we want all the same rules that the enemies have. So if you just right click on an enemy and clone the enemy, just make another version and make sure it's the right one you're working with. So you don't want to take it out of number sequence. You want the last number. And we'll rename this. We'll call this the recharge truck. I'll change it so its pace is going to be sort of a bit slower to allow us to get to it. If we shoot it, I'm actually going to give it minus points for shooting it. I don't think we should. And the health, just going to give it a ridiculous amount of health there, so we can't really destroy it either. So if we right click and edit on this recharge truck, let's import. And so there is just a lorry written there. Okay, and we want it in the center, the hotspot in the center. And there we go. Now we can actually copy and paste. I'm actually going to delete and cut, right click, cut or delete, either way, remove the other frame. So we've just got, I just want the truck to drive straight forward all the time. On the final bit, like we added a new animation for the generator and the road, we're going to right click at the bottom and make a new one. And let's call it recharge. And I'm going to import, and this is going to be the car driving in. So let's double click on that, import it as an animation, and the hotspot is in the center. Now we're going to need to reposition it because the hotspot is going to change. You can see it's there on that picture, but then on this picture, you see it's moving to different places. If we have a look at the stopped animation, we can see where it should be. And the recharge, you can see where it should be on frame 6 matches up. I'm going to hold down the Alt button and click on the hotspot. Maybe just move it left and right just to wiggle it. And holding Alt will move all the other ones to the same X and Y coordinate. So now, there we go. Got it work. Oops, just messed it up there. Let's do it again. precision work there. Great. Let's close that without clicking on this area. The animation is way too fast. In the direction options, I'm going to change it to 12. High speed and low speed of 12. Going in, coming out. Great. Press OK. Now, let's set some rules for this. I'm going to pop it on screen to start with, although it will get destroyed, so maybe I don't need to. So in the event editor, let's set up some code for this. We need to know if our car is directly behind the truck for it to be able to go in. So we're going to add a new condition. It's going to be if we hit the truck. So player 1, collision, another object, the truck. Now that's not good enough because we can hit the truck from the top or from the sides. We want to only hit it directly from behind. So we need to check that our X position, the left-right, matches close enough to the truck. So we're going to right-click on collision between and insert. And we're going to go to special. And we can compare two general values. We're going to find the difference between our X position and the truck's X position. So we're going to do something called an absolute value. So special, calculations, absolute value. An absolute value just ignores the negative sign of an answer. So we're going to say the car's position X coordinate minus, so that's player 1, position X coordinate, minus the recharge truck position X coordinate. Now, if that's equal to 0, we are exactly on, but let's give a lower or equal. If it's lower or equal to 20, it could be 20 pixels either side of the center. It could be minus 20, but the answer will come back as positive 20 because we're using absolute. Okay, so that means that we're directly in line with the truck, but we could still be in front of it. So let's just check we're behind it. So let's right click and insert that if our P1's position, if the Y coordinate is greater than the truck's position Y coordinate, the recharge truck, then we're definitely behind. So we're in line and we're behind and we've hit into it. So at that point, we'll do a few things. We will make our car invisible. So visibility, make invisible. We will then change the recharge truck, right click on that, the animation, change animation sequence to recharge. So a new condition. While it's playing the animation, which animation is it playing? While it's playing recharge, we'll do a few things. We will force our car position, select position, to be in line with the truck. So that it doesn't matter if we're moving or not, we will be forced to be in line with the truck. We'll also set our lives. So underneath player 1, number of lives, set number of lives, we'll set that to maximum, to 50. And we'll also do a few other things. We'll slow down the truck. So we right click, movement, set speed 2, and right click, direction, select direction, upwards. So it slows down, drives upwards. We'll also change the whole speed of driving altogether. So we'll set that counter to be 20, sort of the lowest that it can be. So everything slows down. We drive into the truck, it slows down. Then when it's finished, animation, has animation finished, recharge. At that point, we will become visible again. Visibility, make it reappear. We'll automatically be let go because recharge isn't playing, so it's not going to set the position. We will also set the truck to drive off. So direction, select direction, upwards, and let's set its movement. We will set its speed to be something quite fast, like 150. You can zoom away, and hopefully it will zoom away. We could add in a flag if we wanted, like we did with the road, which we'll get to in the next section. We could add a flag to change it from being able to be driven into or driving off. but for the moment, we'll just give this a go. We'll need to make it spawn. Now, I think every 1,500 distance. So we'll use that mod again. So new condition, special, compare two general values. So if the distance, current value of the distance, mod 1,500 is equal to 0, then we've got to 1,500 or 3,000 or 4,500 or even 0 because it's divisible by 1,500 with no remainders. So if that equals 0, then we'll spawn the truck. And where do we want to create the truck? We will right click and create the object on that row at the generator. Well, not the generator. We want to right click and create the truck, recharge truck at the generator relative to the generator. Okay. So we run our application. The truck should appear as we start our game. Oh, now we have a slight issue. We have a lot of trucks there. Let's resolve that. Let's close our test application. We only want it to trigger once. So right click, insert, special, limit conditions, only one action when this event loops. Now we run our application. There it is. Don't go. We drive in, drive out. Great. Looking good. Now, the next section, we will make it so that the road gets smaller and bigger. Maybe we should make it less likely to have, there seems to be a lot of cars. Let's just double click on here and change it from 1,000 to make it 3 times less likely. And file and save. So right back at the beginning, we set our road to be one object made from a generator, but we had those two animations. So we had the small to big and the big to small. And we even added code in to say that when the flag changed, the road changed. Now we haven't actually implemented that yet, but we're going to do it in much the same way we've done with everything else, triggered by the road entering the area. So new condition, that if a road, if its position, test position, if it enters the screen, let's have a certain chance. So right click and insert, and we'll do special X chances out of Y. And we could do it related to distance, but I'm just going to say that's one chance out of 100 that the road changes. And all we need to do, this is just so simple, is we need to go to generator, right click and say flags, toggle, small. If it's on, it will go off. If it's off, it'll go on. And if it changes, then it will change the animation. So let's run the application and watch, see if the road changes size. There we go, shrinking in. Let's see if we can, oops, drive in, drive off. Oh, drive in and off, oops, dear. Let's fix that. So currently we've got a bit of crazy bouncing happening and such, and if I explode, the cars still keep going and such like. So I'm going to add another flag into these cars, into the vehicles. Now you can go to the frame editor and you can select them all by dragging a box round, or we can just press new and we can call this leave, and just, I missed this one because it's over here, leave. Now it doesn't really matter, you can just leave it called flag 0, it really doesn't matter, but just so that we know what it's going to do. And so I'm going to say that when you hit into the truck and right click and insert, and the truck's odd for value flag is off for leave, then we're going to, on when recharge is over, we're going to right click and flags set on leave. So we're going to add the rule in for when lives reach 0. I've got on line 32 here, that all the cars leave. So all of the group enemies, right clicks, flags, set on, leave. Now in the enemy group, we're going to click on new condition. It's 27 for me. If the enemy's odd for value flag is on, leave. Then at that point, we want to right click under group enemies, direction, select direction, upwards is fine. And then right click, movement, set speed, set it to 100. So that didn't work perfectly because they were still spawning into the game after I died. So this whole spawning bit where we can add one extra condition. So we right click on line 39 is overlapping and insert. We will check that there is a car. So player 1, pick or count, compared to the number of player 1 objects. If it's equal to 1, we run our application. There's some cars that I can destroy. And then when I crash, they drive off. Now, if you have an issue with the speed of anything, I think that I want to adjust when they go to the bottom and go to the top. I find that they zoom off up the top far too quickly there. So what I might do for that is I might say that it's not the pace times 2, but it's just the pace. So I might just say times 1.5 or even just times, just to get rid of the times altogether, because I find that they're just zooming off far too quick. And then going downwards as well, times 2 seems a bit much, but I do think maybe times 1.2. Okay, well, just use those fine controls, and let's just set it up for the end game. So in the frame editor, in the layer toolbars, we select layer 2 and uncheck the padlock. We can now add to this layer and edit things. Insert a new object. Let's insert a string. I'll pop it in. Click once to get some resize boxes. Change those. Let's say game over. Or click the 3 dots, and then we can actually use multiple lines. Game over. Press R to restart. Let's change it to red and change Tahoma to a bigger font size and in the center. There you go. Now we don't want to see that all the time. So what we're going to do is in the display options, we're going to turn off visible at start. Now we can go back to layer 1, check that. Finally, in the event editor, the last couple of rules, when we die, so on line 33, when lives reach 0, we can then say underneath string 3, which we should have named to be something a bit more useful, but string 3 is game over. Let's call it game over. That's just in the about properties. Then visibility, make it reappear, or even flash if you want. You could flash it every second. Finally, new condition, keyboard, upon pressing a key, R, then we can restart the application, the whole thing. So right click, restart the application under the storyboard controls, that chessboard. So we run our application, see if we can crash, see if they drive more sensibly now. Let's see if I can get into that. Oh, nope. Press R to restart. And there we go. Working great. Just adding sounds now. So save your work. Close your test application. And file and save. Now this bit's optional, but fun to do. It's adding some sounds. So at the very top, it's useful to add a new condition. You can add it at the bottom, but if we right click on number 1 and insert a new event, and it's to do with the storyboard starter frame. I like putting it at the top because it is a rule that gets run immediately. So starter frame, let's play some sound. Right click, samples, and we want to play and loop a sample. From a file, we're going to click browse and choose car and 0 for continuous. So it's kind of like a buzzing noise. So if we run our application, you'll hear it. But I want it to change pitch as we drive. So what we're going to do is we're going to say under always, we're going to right click samples, set sample frequency of car, because it's in the list now because we've got it. And we want to do whatever the speed is. So speed current value times 1,000. So we run our application. I think that's nearly it. Let's just right click on the always and edit it. And let's change it, maybe not to 1,000, but to 800. Great. Let's also, at the start frame, we right click samples, play and loop another sample. Let's add some background music, browse. And we've got a quieter version of the song, connection there, and 0 for continuous loop. So we get some cool rock music. So let's make it that we get a power up for going power up noise for when we go in the truck. So that's down the bottom. So I've got that on line 41. So sample, play sample, browse, and let's upgrade. That's great. When we hit into another car, let's find that one. Collision between a car and a car. Sample, play sample, browse. Let's choose hit. And the same I'm going to pull down for when we hit into them. When the bullet hits them, sample, play sample, browse, damage. Let's have a listen. Okay. And then when they hit into the road, let's not play something then because it might get a bit annoying. But when we shoot, so for lines 30, 31, 32, let's right click sample, play sample, browse, and let's choose bullet. Great. When we explode, right click sample, we will stop all the sounds playing. I think that's what we should do. Stop any sample playing, and then right click sample, play sample, samples, play sample. We'll have a few. We'll have an explode. And then right click on the same tick. So stop any sample, play sample, explode, and then samples, play sample, game over. Great. And then I think just when they explode, we'll play a sample of explode that we've already got. Okay, now there might be an issue with this one, and I'll show you why. We play it if we can find it. Listen carefully. Got killed by our own truck. Just going to up the likelihood. I'm just going to up the likelihood of enemies being created. So let's set this back down to maybe 20,000. Run our application. hear that painful noise? Did you hear that painful noise? I hope you did. Right, so well, I hope it wasn't painful. But anyway, their health is less than 0. They get destroyed, but while they're being destroyed, their health is still less than 0. So we're going to do something a bit bizarre here. So we're going to say, because 2 cars could explode at the same time, we're not going to say limit it only once while event happens. What we're going to do is we're going to say that they get destroyed, and we're going to right click, alt for values. We're going to set their health to, you know, a large number, any number that's, you know, higher than 1,000 really, so that they're invincible as they die. Well, anyway, they can't hurt us while they're exploding, so it's not like real life. So now that's there we go. There we go. That's it. Well, I hope you enjoyed making a chase agent or agent chase, whatever you decided to call it. If you have any problems, let us know, and we'll see you on another retro remake. Take care. Bye bye.